Hi, Dr. Cain. Thank you so much for being here with me today on Two Healing Minds. I truly appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and in this video, we are going to be talking about your book, Panic Proof, which provides a wealth of information about panic. It's almost like the reference book on panic. So, this is what we're going to be talking about. And to begin with, I want to start with your personal experience with panic attacks and how did your journey shape your approach to treating anxiety?
Thank you for asking. I think the story is almost as interesting as what we're teaching from the story. So I love to talk about story. And gosh, it began with a fanny pack in third grade and it culminated in the writing of this book. And so the things in between is I grew up in a household where there was a lot of stress. And as a little girl, I found that I was good at stepping in and trying to cheer people up or detect their moods and try to regulate the adults that were around me. And by the time I hit third grade, kids are pretty concrete when they're young and they're like, oh, well, band-aids make everything better. I'm gonna make a little fanny pack first aid kit and take some of the Band-Aids and the Neosporin cream so then if anybody's hurt, I can help them. And of course, as I got a little bit older and I outgrew the Band-Aids and the fanny pack, I started to attune a little bit more to what was going on, perhaps underneath the surface a little bit. And this is, you know, we come from a military background and a lot of ancestral trauma that's just been passed generation to generation. And I found myself really wanting to understand the emotional dynamics better. But we're from the Midwest and we're also Dutch. And so we don't talk about things. And so that made it quite complicated in my culture. And so I started to notice these observations and these awarenesses in me, and I started noticing that I was really stressed, that I was really anxious. And my caretakers said, okay, well, we got to bring you to the doctor. That's what you do. And the doctor says, oh, yes, you have this condition. It's called anxiety.
Mhm.
And it can get really big and you can experience panic. It's just something you have to live with. We're going to give you a medication. And that was interesting in that part of me was a little better in that I was feeling less big of feelings. But the voice of anxiety is trying to communicate something to us. And those variables that were occurring in my life didn't go away, even though my body's ability to communicate that was dulled. And eventually, we go through life, lots of layers. We can totally dive in that more in a little bit. But I went and I got a degree in counseling. And after that, I went and I got my medical degree. And in 2015, the medications that I was taking, the natural remedies that I was using, all of the tools to solve the problem of anxiety, I'd become the expert in recommending.
Mhm.
And everything culminated in nothing was working for me anymore. The anxiety managed to outsmart all of my tips and tricks. And suddenly, I found myself at rock bottom of just sheer unrelenting terror and panic that was really somatic based, really lodged into the body. That either I was going to go down with this anxiety or I had to figure out another way. And that began the process of asking why instead of continuing to recycle what I had inherited in terms of learning and messaging and experiences is starting over and asking new questions. And out of new questions came new answers and amazing transformations in myself and in my patients. And after many years of this, I found I was repeating the same information over and over. And we also saw a big economic shift around 2018, 2019,
Mhm.
and it was more difficult for people to be able to afford access to this kind of information. So I decided to write it all in a book that you could get at the library or any health food store where they sell books or really any online retailer. And that is Panic Proof, which is the book that I'm delighted to get to talk with you about today.
Yes, I mean, I find it amazing. There's just so much that even I didn't know about anxiety, being somebody that has gone through it. And you really open people's eyes to things that they may be unable to explore on their own. So you're providing this to people. And it's interesting when you shared your story, it's always the first course of action for doctors is let's take care of this with medication instead of getting to the source. Well, what is this, the cause of this anxiety, which you detail in the book? And this is what you suggest. You suggest panic attacks are messages from our bodies. So, can you elaborate on how viewing panic as a signal rather than as a symptom? And if you don't mind, I just wanted to share one sentence from your book that you have. You said the more fluent you are in the language of your body, the more easily you will hear its whispers before they turn to shouts. I mean, I love this because it does start with whispers, and physically and mentally, and I like how you say before they turn to shouts, as in a panic attack. So,
Yes.
if you could please elaborate on what you mean.
Yes. One of the biggest myths about anxiety is that it's a problem to be solved. That's like saying that a crying baby is being a broken, bad baby. Babies cry when they need something. They're hungry, they're in pain, they're uncomfortable, they're lonely, they need their diaper changed. Babies cry because that's their way of conveying information. And our job as the caretaker of the baby is to listen to that cry and try to investigate what that cry is telling us. And it's the same thing with our symptoms. And we do this in other arenas of medicine. We look at symptoms and then we go through our algorithmic checklists, and that helps us to run lab tests and to create a diagnosis so that we can then create a treatment. The problem with anxiety is that it can show up very differently for all of us. And there isn't yet a blood test to just diagnose anxiety. And in the 1960s, there was a theory that was developed, and it was called the chemical imbalance theory. And the doctor that developed this theory was theorizing, postulating that perhaps anxiety and depression were due to imbalances in the chemicals in the brain. And so they started to try treating that. They developed the first antidepressant medication, it was Prozac, and they gave Prozac to people, and it took more than 21 trials to show that it beat placebo. I think it took more than 30. Don't quote me on that exact number, but it was quite a lot to show that it beat placebo. But finally, it did by a small amount, and they're like, "Ah, we found the magic pill for helping anxiety." But then what followed from that were decades of psychoeducation and reinforcing the idea that anxiety is a chemical imbalance, that anxiety is bad, that anxiety is a problem, and that we can solve the problem by fixing the chemical imbalance. However, we know that while for some people medications like Prozac work, but for others they don't. And for others, they make them feel way worse. But we weren't really
Mhm.
asking those questions. And then in 2022, this giant meta analysis was published where authors looked at all of the research, they looked at all of the data that was suggesting a chemical imbalance theory. And the authors who did this meta analysis concluded that there is no correlation between serotonin levels, depression, and anxiety, which brings us back to the asking the why. getting to be curious again. And so then this is a circuitous way of me coming to now the question that you asked, this beautiful, brilliant question. And what we have found with the asking of the whys, with doing more creative research, with finding other possible root causes of anxiety, is that our anxiety is the body's attempts at telling us something's out of balance. And there's a
Mhm.
difference, I think, perhaps, to distilling out anxiety versus panic versus fear. And if it's all right with you, I would love to make sure that our terms are defined so that as we keep talking that people will know what I mean when I use those words. Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's important. Yes.
Yeah. So, fear, we'll start with fear. Fear is a biological response that is also a logical, emotional, mental response to actual danger. Thank goodness we can have a fear response. Our ancestors who had fear responses were the ones who were able to save themselves and get out of danger and then reproduce, right? So Susie is gathering berries in the field, there's a tiger growling in the bushes. Fear of that actual danger helped Susie to get away. Now, anxiety is where we have that same response, that same activation, but there's no actual danger. And panic is on a spectrum with anxiety. Some of the research that you see, the old research that we see still in the diagnostic statistical manual, that big purple book that we use for psychiatric
Yes.
diagnosis, it says that panic occurs out of the blue, but the research doesn't really suggest that that is correct. We see the whispers. We see little signs that the body, the mind is detecting danger or stress or activation. And that if that source of stress or activation isn't resolved, mitigated, removed, remediated, then it will get bigger and louder until it feels like panic, that crisis. And so we have fear, very normal, anxiety, fear out of danger context, and panic, an extreme intense version of that.
I love how you defined each term because it is important because there are, as you suggested, different levels of anxiety, and panic is the extreme,
Yeah.
like basically the shout. You started with the whisper, and I refer to the panic as the shout. And yeah, and you also mentioned about the medication, the chemical imbalance, which almost sounds ridiculous in a way today, because you're thinking it goes deeper. There's
Yeah.
more of a root to anxiety other than a chemical imbalance. And, that goes with depression too, even though we're just talking about anxiety now. It can be the societal factors, it can be trauma, it can be your culture, your family. As you mentioned too, in your family, traumatic past where it's, I think it's, is it traumatic culture, what's passed on from generation to generation?
Yes.
So there's so many different factors into anxiety. And this is another thing that I love about your book, because a lot of people don't know. It's not just one kind of anxiety.
Yeah.
There are different types, and you mentioned 9 distinct types of anxiety, and people would love to know this. This might be hard, but if you can briefly touch base with all 9 types of anxiety that you spoke about in chapter 3.
This is a great thing to emphasize because one of the biggest myths about anxiety is that we don't experience it. For example, I see this a lot in the anger management community is, oh, you're just angry. You need to calm your anger down. But oftentimes we see that the anger is a response to a deeper experience, whether that is attachment or safety or meaning, right? And so we can look at all of the individuals. If you go to a city street and you ask everybody, what is it like for you when you feel scared or worried or fearful or activated? They'll all describe it slightly differently. And if we look at all of the research, we look at all of that, we can generally recategorize those into the 9 approximate types. And the gift of that is it opens doors, I think, for better research.
Mhm.
It opens doors for more precision treatments. And it's also empowering for people to say, oh, my heart's beating hard right now. I might be feeling a little bit of that activation. Here's what I can do. So let's go through the 9 types.
Oh,
The
yes.
first,
I love it. Here.
this, this is my favorite
I've
thing to
already
talk about.
identified the ones that I went through, so it's good that you have that.
Oh my goodness. And I want to know what they are, if you feel cozy answering that. But you want to go through the 9 types first so
Yes,
people know
could
what
you
we're talking
please?
about?
Yes.
So the first type is thought anxiety. This is anxiety that can show up in the way that you think. Sometimes we worry, we future trip, maybe we get ADHD, distracted thoughts. So many of us are being diagnosed with ADHD
Mhm.
when really we're anxious. And an anxious brain, you don't want your anxious brain to fixate on something. You want your anxious brain to be able to detect danger in all of the possible parts of the woods. You want your brain to be bopping around and aware. And sometimes when we're anxious, our thoughts just go blank. Someone
Mhm.
asks us a question and we're like, I can't find the words, right?
Mhm.
The second type is nervous system anxiety. And this is anxiety that really shows up in the nervous system. So this could be tight shoulders, it could be tight muscles, it could be headaches, it could even be numbness and tingling, where your body is sending all that blood and the resources to your runaway fight muscles and deprioritizing things like your nose or maybe your fingertips. And so it can feel tingly and confusing for people. Knowing that, oh, this could be activation of my nervous system. I'm not having a stroke. I've had my doctor do all of the testing. I'm very healthy and safe, and I need to calm my nervous system. And the next type is chest anxiety. This is anxiety that can affect your heartbeat. It can make your heart speed up or slow down or sometimes palpitate. It can affect you feeling like maybe there's an elephant on your chest. That was a big thing for me when my anxiety was at its worst is I couldn't get a deep enough breath and there's an elephant on my chest. Some people hyperventilate, they breathe really quickly. Maybe you've seen in television sitcoms, they give them a brown bag to breathe in because they're hyperventilating. That's chest anxiety.
And
And
this
then
was
we have,
chest anxiety. Okay.
yes, that's that chest, the lungs and the heart and the muscles in the chest. And then we have gut anxiety, and I see this so often in kiddos
Mhm.
where their tummy hurts before school, or maybe they throw up when they're feeling nervous, or they don't have a good appetite, or even people who are diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome where they have constipation or diarrhea or gas or bloating. We know that the gut microbiome has a very important role in the health of our brain and our mood and our hormones and our immune system. So, knowing that the gut may be a part of it will help us zero in on looking at what the gut's doing. And then we have immune system anxiety. And a lot of us, myself included, actually, right now, I'm just coming out of a bout of just unrelenting allergies.
Mhm.
And those
Mhm.
same little chemicals that can create the itchy, watery eyes and the runny nose, and maybe even the skin rash or the hives, histamine, can be as stimulating to the nervous system as adrenaline. And so we see that oftentimes autoimmunity can go hand in hand with panic and anxiety and even insomnia. And so then we have anger anxiety, which I like to look at that as a separate distilled option because I also study Ayurveda. And
Okay.
Ayurveda is a system of medicine that's been around for thousands of years, comes from India. And if somebody is their system is overheated, maybe if someone is listening, if you've ever been in Arizona in the summer, the amount of road rage
Oh.
is just so high.
Mhm.
People are hot, they're bothered, they're irritated, they're frustrated, their nervous system is on fight flight. And knowing that heat and anger can go together gives us tools to calm down. I had a patient once, she was 12 years old. she used to have panic attacks as a result of getting hot.
Hmm.
And so her solution was to go for the ice, to get in the pool.
Really.
And that calmed panic and rage for her. Then we have depressive anxiety. And so this is when I can feel sad and worthless and hopeless and despairing, but also worrying and fearful and panicky. And so they can live together and the treatments would be different. And then there's trauma anxiety. And really, truly, trauma is the umbrella that oversees everything. But I have parsed it out for those where that's the main thing. It started with an incident or multiple incidents, like a car accident or being in a dangerous situation or an environmental situation, and you have nightmares, intrusive thoughts, worries, flashbacks, avoidance of that specific thing, and then you focus on the trauma treatment first. So I think we got through all nine. Does that track?
Yes, yes, you did. And what's great about your book is for listeners, there is a section for each one. You can kind of go through and check. It's kind of like to test to see which one can apply to you, and perhaps sharing that with your doctor or your therapist, which can guide them towards a better treatment options, as you said.
Yeah.
So yes, you covered them all, and it's
May I add a
interesting.
nuance
Oh,
to
oh yeah,
that too?
oh yeah, yeah, sure.
The first question that people will often ask about that, so for your audience who takes the quiz, what's invariably going to be that first question is, what if I have more than one? And
Oh, yeah, because I already know I went through more than one, and it's interesting you said
yes,
that question. I asked that same question. I said, I bet you a lot of people are going to say like, "Hey, I have all of these."
totally. Because when we're feeling a little bit worried, the body isn't communicating as thoroughly and as loudly as when all hands on deck and the body is invoking multiple systems for a panic attack. So the gift of this is to think about your stoplight strategies, which I write about in the book, is what is it like when your anxiety first kicks in? So you've been in the green, you've been calm, you've been relaxed, but then that first little canary, that first little peep, like, ooh, we're getting a little stressed. My first sign, oh, I feel like just a little lump in my throat or a little bit of a speed up of my heart. And then if we don't hear that and it escalates through the yellow, which is just getting louder and louder, if it escalates into the red, you might notice, well, in addition to my heart picking up, that I also feel hot and I also feel like I'm hyperventilating and my stomach is in knots, right? So you want to try to find out what your type is, that first indicator, and intercede there first so that by the time you're at a panic 10 out of 10 red light crisis, you don't have all of the symptoms.
Okay, so you basically can have, let's say, you can have depressive anxiety the same time as the nervous system anxiety, anger anxiety, and trauma anxiety all at once.
If it's really bad, depending on the person, it could be a whole smorgasbord. But the goal is that we don't have to get to the shouts, that we
Yes.
feel empowered so that it's not, and it can be so confusing. And that's often why doctors are like, just take this medication.
The quick
It's
fix.
it's so intense and unbearable. Like you need a quick fix, and that's okay for some of us. And also, it's all data. So if we do the quick fix, put a semicolon there, and then let's start digging in and being curious and exploring the why.
Yes, and also it's a reminder to listeners when we're not suggesting that medication is bad. Yes, in
Yeah.
severe cases, but as you said, it's getting away from being dependent on it, having other ways to manage without the only thing you're relying on is medication. You want to eventually get away from that because some of them they can be habit forming.
And the antidote to anxiety is personal power, where the goal isn't to never feel symptoms coming up. The goal is not to feel calm all the time, But it's when the body starts talking and we're like, "Oh, I'm getting a little bit of that numbness in my nose. Oh,
Yes.
I know why, and I know what to do." Because the antidote to anxiety is personal agency. The antidote to anxiety is personal power. That's the difference between fear and anxiety, right? Fear is true danger. Anxiety is our body is trying to protect us. It thinks we're in danger, but we're really not, and we know what to do to help calm the body again.
Okay, and which your book definitely provides all those resources. And what I want to cover next is because you said gut health is very extremely important. I think that's where a lot of our serotonin is formed, and there's supplements you suggest of managing anxiety for gut health. So if you can suggest, I know there's like a lot. I'm looking in the back here, the panic proof protocol. There's many suggestions you have, but if you can give some natural remedies for gut health.
Yeah.
And what is it in the guts that's formed that can make one more anxious?
You were spot on with the serotonin piece,
Mhm.
is 90% of our serotonin is made in the gut, and there's this whole field of science about psychobiotics. And psychobiotics are probiotics. They're the bacteria that live in our gut that have been studied to impact the brain and our moods. And we like to think that we have a really good dinner and that we're craving that cupcake, but it's actually the bacteria in our gut that are sending a signal to the brain saying, we want a cupcake.
Oh,
Our gut bacteria regulate our moods, they regulate our preferences, they regulate our cravings, and every single person's gut microbiome is as unique to them as their fingerprint. We inherit our gut microbiome from our biological mother, and that microbiome could contain lots of health promoting bacteria. And those health promoting bacteria can help us break down nutrients to make chemicals that our body uses to detox and send information and to strengthen muscles and cells and hormones. And our gut microbiome could also create problems if there are pathogens that we inherit, or perhaps our mother wasn't able to do a vaginal delivery, or maybe you were given or she was given antibiotics and the gut microbiome was compromised. And the gut microbiome, the name of the game is diversity. And so, if we inherit or we at a young age have a microbiome that isn't diverse, then opportunistic bacteria and viruses and yeasts and fungi can take over and cause symptoms. And so, sometimes we found that individuals who suffer from panic and anxiety, that one of the root causes is imbalances in the gut microbiome. And we want to treat the gut. And so, interestingly, someone can come in to see a doctor with anxiety, and the doctor focuses all on their gut. They're not giving them psychotropic medications. Maybe they're not even giving them mental health herbs. They're just healing the gut. And of course, depending on your unique gut and what's going on, your treatments will vary. But generally speaking, there are a few things that I think would be beneficial for almost anybody. And so, one is adding fiber to the diet.
mhm.
Fiber is food for the gut microbiome. Fiber feeds the good bugs, and then when the good bugs grow, they crowd out the bad bugs that can cause hormone issues, histamine issues, mood issues, digestion issues, inflammation issues, all of those things. It can crowd those bad bugs out and help your acid base balance, help your digestion, all of that. So, fiber. And fiber sources for those who want practical advice, like today, is eat an apple, eat green veggies, eat complex carbs like brown rice or even wild rice, and start nourishing your gut with fiber. The second thing is to give the gut bacteria really happy prebiotic foods, but you want to do that once you have the good bugs. So if you've been diagnosed and you have bad bugs in your gut, you don't want to give a prebiotic to that because then you'll feed the bad ones. And so once you have good bugs, then you want to give them prebiotics. And that would be like yogurt or kimchi or sauerkraut, um, wonderful things like that if it's fortified with good bacteria. So add fiber, prebiotics, and then the third is if you don't have the good bacteria or if they've gone through quite a lot of stress, then a good psychobiotic is where I would start. And there are companies that actually manufacture probiotics where they've studied the bacteria in a community in human trials. And so
Hmm.
just like, do you by chance have you ever owned a cat?
Oh, it's funny. Actually, I do have a cat.
Yeah. So then you probably know cat psychology better than someone who's never had a cat. Is like you may have a very cute, friendly cat. And then your best friend over here, she may also have a very cute, friendly cat. But you can't always assume that when you bring those cats into each other's presence, that cute and friendly things will occur. Cats can be particular, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely. Mhm.
yeah. And so it's the same with our gut microbiome and probiotics that we take is you have to pick products that have been studied that they work together, like two cats coming together as friends, that these
Mhm.
products actually will work together well. And so I try to not recommend specific brands, but there are some in the book that you can look at that are well studied.
Yes, and you provide a lot of information about um, alternative ways as far as like for digestive issues, nausea, heartburn. Um, yeah, I mean, provide all that detail. If anyone wants to explore it some more, it is in the book. And leading on to my next question is, since we're talking about, we're covering panic attacks here, and we know that trauma can contribute to the onset of panic attacks. And so, what steps can individuals take to address trauma, other than, of course, seeing a therapist in their healing journey?
The first is to identify what the panic is an adaptation to. Think about it like you live in, right now I'm in Michigan. And then when winter hits here in Michigan, I'm going to go to Arizona where it's warm. And as an adaptation in the winter, we put on a warm coat. That warm coat is helpful, it keeps us warm, it's life saving. Similar to if we go through something difficult and stressful, your body will adapt to that. And that adaptation can get stuck. So that getting stuck adaptation is like that's like me keeping the coat on then when I go to Arizona. And that which was helpful and useful and perhaps necessary is now causing me issues. It's causing me to overheat in the desert. It's causing me to feel suffocated, right?
Hmm.
So our bodies are constantly scanning what is happening and what isn't happening, even outside of our conscious awareness, and making adaptations throughout all of our systems to try to protect us from danger. And that really is the definition of trauma. It's how our bodies have to adapt to something that does or does not happen to us. And so we talk about micro traumas or little t traumas. I call them adversive events. And then we have macro traumas, big T traumas. So a little one might be just being undermined all the time growing up and not developing that self confidence. And so when you feel insecure, you're more prone to anxiety. A big T trauma may be that you went through a tornado and that always when weather happens, the body's like, that could be dangerous. It could ruin our home. So that's a big
Hmm.
T trauma, right? So when it comes to healing trauma, we want to try to identify what the adaptation was. And so a great practical place to start is to write your biography. Our biography becomes our biology. So write down your story. You can write as much as you want. For those who love journaling and writing, I love that. You could be as detailed as you want, Or it could be really quite brief, like, these are the major events that happened in my life or that should have happened and didn't happen, good or bad. Just anything that changed the way that I saw myself, the world, or others, the way that I existed, maybe even little bits. And then once we've figured out what that is, then we look creatively and say, okay, I noticed that when I hit puberty at 12, we'll say, that that's really when anxiety started. Because I really noticed that. So something happened or didn't happen that's like a coat that we put on in the winter. And I'm still wearing that coat because ever since then, my anxiety has been through the roof. So now we have an activating event or an activating period of time. And in that particular example, maybe we look at what were your hormones doing? If you inherited a gut microbiome that had Clostridia, Clostridia is an opportunistic bacteria that lives in the gut of some people, and it can change the way we metabolize estrogen. So then, as our body starts producing estrogen and puberty's kicking in this example, if you have a gut bacteria that changes the way we metabolize that, maybe throughout the rest of your hormonal life, you'll have these symptoms until it's corrected. So we create a timeline, and then we get curious about what might have been going on at that timeline, and then we can start doing some deeper Sherlock Holmes digging. And, for those who are
Mhm.
listening that are like, I'm not a hormone expert, I'm not an
Mm.
endocrinologist, how
Mhm.
could I possibly know? There's checklists in the book. So there's checklists like these are signs of estrogen imbalance, these are signs of inflammation, these are signs of an imbalance in your gut. And then bring that information to your trusted doctor and say, I was thinking all of this started with puberty. Is there
Mhm.
anything my hormones have anything to do with my anxiety? And for many, the answer is yes. And then if we do testing, and this happens, I don't know if you've run into this yourself, but I have so many women, especially perimenopausal women, whose hormones are ebbing and flowing, but every time they get them checked, they're normal. And
Mhm.
so our lived experience is that my hormones are not okay, but my actual tests are normal. Then I have in the book, what do you do next with that? And so that's in the chapter of testing. So you have tier 1 testing, what if this happens and that happens, the tier 2 testing, tier 3 testing, just to give the answer for those that are like, this is me, you're
Yes.
speaking to me, is it could be environmental. And so that means that if you lived in a moldy building or went to school or worked a job that was in a wet building or a moldy building, or if you've been exposed to environmental toxins like pesticides, organophosphates, glyphosate, these things can be endocrine disruptors, plastic. So then we
Mhm.
can get curious like, okay, well, is it the bacteria? Is it the environmental toxins? And I walk you through how to think about it differently because then suddenly, instead of, well, I have anxiety because I'm broken, take this pill, which may or may not work, now suddenly it opens the doors for, I think, what are more interesting questions that can lead to treatments that actually make us healthier so that the crying baby in this metaphor no longer needs to cry.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Dr. Kane. I think you covered actually 2 points in the question,
Uh
like your
huh.
hormonal
Yeah.
system or endocrine system can have a lot to do with anxiety, and you cover that in your book. Whether it's from like estrogen, progesterone, your thyroid, just to let listeners know that there is a section for that. And something great that you mentioned too, that most people will not be familiar with, is the tests that
Yeah.
should be given by their primary doctor, because your primary doctor is not going to give it to you. They just give you your general, is it CBC,
Yes.
CBC, and your metabolic. They're not going to go into the details of like your estrogen project. It's almost like you have to request it. And I love that you give those suggestions in the book. Hey, why don't you request this test from your doctor?
Yeah.
So those are great. So you cover the physical part, and then the question of like how does trauma impact anxiety, you mentioned, is let's find the root. when did this trauma begin? Or when did this anxiety start in your life? And do you agree that it can, I mean, obviously, can personality be a factor too? Personality types? I don't know if you've looked into that, of how anxiety, like for instance, like a type A person is going to be different with anxiety than someone that's HSP, highly sensitive. I don't know if you've looked into that too.
I love this. This is such a wonderful question. So interesting. And I think about it in terms of tendencies. So I think I tend to, just thinking about my story, is I tend to be much more of a highly sensitive person. And I think that was also an adaptation, is to be overly attuned and to try to manage those that were around me, to try to be safe. And so having the ability to be highly attuned and highly sensitive, I think, is a gift. And our environment can affect the ways that that gift shows up. And type A, I think that is also an adaptation. I also identify as a type A. I'm a Virgo. I'm a type A. I like everything to be organized, which you see in this book. And I think that those are adaptations where I think about that adaptation, and then I think about, well, what enables me to have that unique adaptation? And we see that highly sensitive people, for example, may have a mutation in what we call the warrior gene, which is the MAO gene,
Mm-hmm.
where individuals will break down neurotransmitters in such a way where we experience bigger feelings. So anxiety can be bigger, fear can be bigger, depression can be bigger, empathy can be bigger. And those are the people that get stuff done when you have a righteous indignation and you will fight for justice versus like, meh, I'm okay with it. Those are people that get things done. But in a
Yes.
culture that doesn't cultivate that as a warrior, as a superhero gene, but is cultivated as a, wow, your feelings are way too big for the rest of us to deal with, you need to be medicated gene, then we can then identify as, I am type A, and that makes me broken, or I am overly sensitive. I was told when I was growing up, oh, Nicole, you're overly sensitive. And instead of that being a superpower to help me heal and become even more amazing in the way that I show up in this world, it becomes something that cripples me, something that is holding me back. So for those that are looking at traits and characteristics, is think of them as adaptations, and then start to ask yourself, is how can this adaptation empower me in healing and feeling more free and feeling more vibrant, right?
Yeah, I love how you mentioned it because I know there's a whole community. I just learned about it a few years ago.
Yeah.
The term HSP, or highly sensitive people, which I identify with. I didn't even know it
Yeah.
existed until I was
Yeah.
doing my own research. And I love how you say they're warriors. That's true.
It
Because
is.
it's like they're the healers, the helpers, and as you identify, they're the ones that see there's something wrong. Like, hey, I need to do something to correct it,
Yeah.
or need to be the helper. And so
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that with, personality types. Because I know there's people out there, everybody has a different type of personalities. You think about the ones that are like, the ones that like have that armor, or they're tough, they're pursuit, like they're able to hold their anxiety a little bit better than the HSP people or something. But as you said, it's like an adaptation process.
Yeah, yeah, it's an adaptation, and then suddenly, I'm not broken.
Mhm.
Suddenly, oh my gosh, like, I am really good at attuning. I am really good at seeing injustices, and sometimes it can hijack me, and it can result in me feeling panicky and anxious and sad and overwhelmed. So how can I lean into that adaptation in a way that I can feel in control and I can use it for my highest good in this world, as opposed to it using you?
Yes, very good. I love how you described it. And I want to share another important chapter. I mean, all your chapters are important. Chapter 9 is retraining your nervous system. And I like how you describe it as bottom up processing.
Yeah.
And so, how can maybe be briefly describe what that means for listeners to be able to start implementing to control or help with their anxiety?
Yeah. We'll do this in a four-step process, the panic reset, where traditionally when we would go and deal with anxiety, it was very much like, how can you talk yourself out of it? It was using logic and analysis to try to control the body and your reactions. But let's face it, sometimes the body doesn't care what our brain has to say. The body's like, I got you. We're going to run from that tiger. And you're like, but there's no tiger in the brain. The body's like, nope, nope, we're sure there's tiger ears. Hold on, right? So bottom up is in reference to what the clinical research is showing works, I think, in many ways quite well, where we start with the lower parts of the brain, the more reptilian parts of the brain, the limbic system, the brain stem, starting with the body-based systems, and then working our way up. So the four steps in brief, what you can start doing today is number one, is practice getting into your grounded self. Because when we get anxious, our emotional brain takes over and our logical brain offline. Because you don't want to analyze the tiger's motivations and stripes and things. You just want to fight, flight, or flee, right? You want to
Mhm,
get away.
mhm,
So when we get activated, logical brain's out the window. So we want to practice creating tools and strategies that will bring us back. And so what you can do practically speaking, if you have kids, if you like fidgets and things, is make a panic pack. I actually started making panic packs for flying because I used to have a horrible fear of flying.
well,
So put in there cold chemical packs where you shake them up. They're the size of your phone or your wallet. You
mhm,
shake it up, it gets cold. You can put that on your face, your chest, your neck. You could put fidgets in there that help movement and touch. You can put sour candies, lemon candies in there that can activate the calming vagus nerve, the root of the tongue. Swallowing activates vagus nerve to calm the body. You can put a little salt packet in there. Some people find that putting salt in the back of their tongue can help. And also maybe earbuds where maybe you play bilateral beats or ambient music, or maybe you turn on the noise cancellation. So you
mhm,
practice in step one, whatever you could do to ground in your body. The rules of three things you can hear, three things you can see, three things you can touch, right? Then step two is now that we're back in the body, when we're grounded in the body, now we want to awaken logical brain. We want to create a road so that when we're in emotional brain that we can activate logical brain. And so this is doing puzzles. Like when I fly now, I do Sudoku puzzles. It keeps my logical brain on board so she doesn't go out the window and let emotional brain take over. This is doing mental math. In amygdala deamplification treatment, which is called havening, they use emotional brain, logical brain, and you go
mhm,
back and forth, emotional, logical, emotional, logical. Step three is now we're going to bridge the gap. Is we're going to bridge the gap between our logical brain and our body awareness. Is practice every day. Maybe when you're brushing your teeth is a great time to do this. Is you're brushing your teeth and maybe you notice the taste of the toothpaste in your mouth. You notice the bubbles. You notice the mintiness. Maybe you notice the salivation. Maybe then you decide to notice the bristles, the bristles of the toothbrush in your teeth. Maybe you even do a little extra credit and you do a body scan where you start at your feet and you notice your feet and you work your way up with awareness to your head. And then the fourth step. So we've gotten into the body, we've woken up logical brain, we've bridged the gap between the two, so we're aware of the communication between the two. So you hear that yellow light right when it starts, you hear those whispers right when it starts. And then the fourth step is, how do we reprogram our nervous system? And so what we want to do is we want to increase nervous system flexibility. We call this variability, where we want the nervous system to be able to get aroused and we want to be able to calm it. And there's lots of ways that we can practice doing this. One is those anger, fire, heat, those people in Arizona that get heat anger and anxiety,
Yes.
cold plunges would probably be good for them. So you cool off the body. And when you get into a cold plunge, you might notice that people are like, oh, this is intense. And they go into autonomic arousal and they practice. They say to themselves, I'm going to choose from my power to sit here for 30 seconds and I'm going to breathe. And even though it feels really, really perhaps bad and uncomfortable, out of my personal power, I'm going to sit here for 30 seconds. I'm going to regulate while I'm in this. And then maybe you get out, you rescue yourself, or you're like, I'm going to do another 30 seconds.
Mhm.
And so then you have this experience of being in control while having yucky feelings and regulating it so that when panic strikes, if or when anxiety strikes, you've done this 1,000 times. Another practical way is to do high intensity interval training where you move your body, maybe do jumping jacks or run or walk really fast for 15 to 30 seconds. You get your heart rate up and then you slow down. So you're thing is to do something that stresses you out a little bit, like high ropes courses or climbing a rock wall. Things that are truly safe, but help you practice knowing what it's like to get activated and aroused and pull yourself out of it. And if you go through those 4 steps on a regular basis, no matter what happens, you're going to have that personal sense of power that I can handle this and I know what to do.
Oh, I love it's almost like you can carry this emergency kit with you wherever
Yeah,
you go if you're going through anxiety and
yeah,
put things in it that you know will help you. And this
yes,
probably depends on what type of anxiety. You know, one of the 9 types of anxiety that you have is like, suppose that you know you have anger anxiety, you might need that little cooling pack in your
yeah,
emergency kit that you take it, or nervous
yeah,
system anxiety, where you might need those little earplugs where you need to listen to some calming or meditation music or guided meditation. So I love how
yes,
you said the emergency kit for when you're flying, but that
yeah,
can apply to anywhere you go. Maybe you can just take that out with you. You can sit in your car
yeah,
during your lunch break at work or
yes.
wherever, take out your emergency kit and say, hey, I'm having a stressful day at work today. I'm going to go take a break and take out my emergency kit.
Yes,
And
and you
yeah,
can put fun stuff in there. You can put essential oils in there. You can even put your tincture of choice in there. So I teach you how to make your own herbal blends. Of course, talk to your doctor before taking any new supplements or medicines or remedies. But I love herbs. Herbs are all around us. We evolved on this planet with these beautiful plants that can really heal us and they can help us balance. And so, for example, a great herb that I love to use is lemon balm or Melissa. And this herb over time can help balance and recalibrate the nervous system so that we're less likely to get anxious in the future. It's great if you have kind of restlessness, palpitations, chest anxiety. It's really good for that. Or if you have, let's say, gut anxiety, chamomile is awesome for gut anxiety. Chamomile is an herb, has been studied. It's called a carminative, which means it can help with indigestion. It can help with increasing GABA levels. We love
mhm,
GABA. GABA calms us down. That's what
yes.
benzodiazepines work on. And it also is gentle and sweet and lovely. And so, depending on what type of anxiety you're experiencing, you can put those kinds of goodies in your panic pack and you have them with you.
Yeah, it's very useful. And it's more of something, as you mentioned earlier, that the person has control. The
Yeah.
person is finding other ways to manage their anxiety instead of taking their prescription bottle out and relying solely on their prescription medication, which we agreed earlier can be habit forming. You have another emergency kit that can help you throughout the day, no matter where you are, whether you're at home, work, on the plane.
Yeah.
So anywhere. So I really appreciate all the details that you provide in Panic Proof. And another thing, I want to talk about. is obstacles. I know that difficult
Yes.
word that people may go through obstacles. They've might have experienced panic attacks more than once. One person might have experienced it one time, and then they have it under control. And but then there's the people that the obstacle. Like, how do you face that?
Yeah. I always tell this story. Even when I was teaching, I taught medical students for many years, and I always told this story about this guy who came in and he had a sore toe. And so he'd gone to the doctors and they couldn't figure out how to fix his toe. And so we gave him natural remedies. He tried aspirin and all sorts of things for his toe, and it always hurt. So we gave him the medicine, and he reported his toe felt a lot better. So we called and followed up with him the next day. His toe is a whole lot better. And then a week later, he comes in and his toe hurts again. We're like, well, geez, this medicine didn't work very well. Let's try an even better one. So we give him a medicine, we call him, we check on him the next day. He's like, oh, I'm feeling so much better. The day after that, we check on him again, just making sure, like, what's going on with
Yeah.
his toes? He have gout? What's going on? His toe was still much better. But then the next week, same thing happened. He came in and he was having foot pain. And so what it turns out is that he had arthritis in his hands, but he loved to go bowling. And so he would go bowling, and invariably he would crush his toe
Oh,
with the ball. And suddenly the treatment is very different, right? Because we're not treating the toe anymore, we're treating the obstacle, which is that he keeps smashing it.
yes.
And so when we were able to address that effectively, the toe, the treatments for the toe started working. And so for those who are listening and you feel like you've taken all the supplements, you've done all the therapies, you've tried the exercise, you're like, this is nothing new under the sun. I've done it all. There may be something that you're missing. There may be an obstacle. And you want to look at the social domains. Maybe you need a relationship ectomy of some sort. Or it could be job. Is your job creating more stress and strife for you, or is it nourishing and fulfilling you? It may be that you're living in a building where there's, God forbid, mold in the walls, right?
Hmm.
So you want to look at it in the spiritual domains. Are you soul sick? Do you feel empty? Or maybe there's spiritual oppression that's happening. Or is it psychological or is it biological? And start to get creative with your questioning of what might be getting in the way of me getting better. And I love this. The sun is like, I'm
Oh,
like
yeah. I noticed this.
rotating
I noticed
as
you're
I'm
going into the sun.
like sliding over here, so it's I'm like glowing.
And that's another thing I love, that you look at the whole person, because we're all so unique, and there's so much to being human. As you
Yes.
said, the social component, your work component, where do you live? What do you
Yeah.
do during the day? There's just so much that can contribute to
Yes.
anxiety and maybe potential panic attacks. And this is what I wanted to conclude with, just going on that point. At the end of your book, you have a panic proof protocol that people can look for as for reference. So, for someone who's stuck in anxiety or panic, can you describe what your protocol includes, which is like your
Yeah.
concluding chapter?
Yeah, I wanted my readers to walk away with a plan. There's so much analysis paralysis that can happen, and I want to help you connect the dots between, oh, well, this is the likely type, and well, what do we do about that? So when you're reading the book, you can read the book randomly, just open a page and read a page here and there, or you can read through the entire thing. And as you read through it, there's spaces with journaling prompts, questions, checklists, quizzes. And so then you can actually write in the book. And so if, for example, you're in the 90th percentile of immune system symptoms, and then in the panic proof protocol, it will say, this is what you got on that, and then here's what you do next. And it walks you through actually creating a plan that includes nutrition, supplements, lab testing, lifestyle changes. It also has how to make your own herbal tincture based
Mhm.
on a table that's like, oh, it's in my thoughts. I'm generally chilly when I'm anxious, and helps you know how to make your own tincture and even dose it. So you'll walk away. You can even make copies for your loved ones, print them out, do this with a friend, and make different plans. Bring them to your doctors and make sure that it's cozy for them. And then you'll know exactly what to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love about this book. It's so detailed, and as you said, you give ideas about, like, look at your diet. How can you change? Like, foods for healing for the brain and body, your lifestyle, exercise, sleep, boundaries, habits, and giving natural remedies that you can make on your own. So, like, supplements you can look into, herbal teas. I mean, I'm just going through here. There's just
Yeah.
so much that you can add, and you break it down, like, the anger anxiety protocol, the depressive anxiety protocol. So you do break it down for each anxiety type that you mentioned earlier. And I love it. And again, I want to say, Dr. Cain, thank you so much for being here and talking about Panic Proof. It's just a tremendous amount of information for people that have experienced anxiety, and information, just like with me, that I have not heard of, that I learned from your book.
Oh,
And again, thank you.
truly, thank you. It is such a joy to see the book out in the world and to empower healers like yourself in helping people to learn how their symptoms are their saving graces, how your symptoms are here to serve you so that you can get healthier and healthier. And so thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Goodbye.